Hi, everyone. Welcome to Parkdale Community Safety Workshop.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Parkdale Community Safety Workshop. We're going to have the workshop start in a few minutes. We're just going to give other people the opportunity to join us.
Do the hosts want to introduce themselves?
Sure.
So my name is Rosalie, and I'm one of the lady in the Parkdale Leadership Women's Group. And now, Berlin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Berelan. I'm one of the women from the Parkdale Women Leadership Group. I also work at Parkdale People's Economy. And we're going to start the Parkdale Community Safety Workshop in a few minutes. Just going to give other people the opportunity to join us. Thank you. Hello, everyone. For those of you who are just joining, welcome to the Parkdale Community Safety Workshop. My name is Berelan. We're going to start in a couple more minutes. Just want to give other people the opportunity to join us. I'm one of the co-hosts this evening, and my colleague here, Rosalie, she's one of the co-hosts also.
Okay, we just hit 6:05, so Rose, feel free to get started.
Yep. Again, welcome back to Parkdale Community Workshop and Transformative Justice, facilitated by Nadia Timberlake. Zoom overview. Mute and unmute yourself. Please remember to mute if you are not speaking. Take yourself on and off camera. Take yourself off camera if you're Wi-Fi is unstable. In the participant tab, you can raise and lower your hand. You can also rename yourself, which is very helpful during group discussion. In the chat box tab, you can post comments and questions that we will raise during discussion. We will also post link here as well. Language interpreted.
Sorry, Rose, I jumped past that one just because we don't have our language interpreter with us tonight, unless anyone on the call is requesting Tibetan translation. Please let us know right now or over the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. The London acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we are gathering and learning on the territories of the Wendat, Petun, and First Nations, the Seneca and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. The land is subject to the two-row wampum belt treaty, and the dish with one spoon wampum belt treaty, a place treaty between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee to agree to share the resource of the land as long as the dish never runs dry. Over time, Indigenous, First Nation, peoples, and settlers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of in the spite of mutual respect and solidarity. As treaty people, we are committed to upholding these values in our organizing. Now, community agreement. Our group is dedicated to creating an inclusive environment for all. We will not tolerate harassment of any form. If you witness or experience harassment, please inform a member of the organizing team, marked by a star. We will also be offering a breakout peer support space with a supportive listener. The supportive listener will be Berlin. Berlin, would you like to say something?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm the supportive listener this evening. That means if you're triggered by something that is said or done in the space, you could just private message me or Mercedes, and we'll go into a breakout space where we have a conversation about the issue. Thank you. Back to you, Rose.
Thank you, Berlin. Community agreement. One diva, one mic, which is one person speak, we all listen. Make space, take space. Oops, out. Be mindful of time. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Awareness of power and privilege. Patience and respect. Please note, session will be recorded. And at this time, I would like to hand it over for Berlin to do the agenda. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We did the welcome and the Zoom overview. Then we're going to move on to overview of the Parkdale Community Safety Workshops. And then the learning session this evening is on Transformative Justice. And then we're going to move on to the next steps. The Parkdale Community Safety Workshop series is being offered in partnership between the Parkdale Women's Leadership Group and Mutual Aid Parkdale. Parkdale Women's Leadership Group is a collective of racialized women from Parkdale who are bound together to take action for human rights and justice. We are brought together through the Parkdale Leadership Training Series to organize in our community, and we created a harm reduction zine and a peer support space called the Parkdale Wellness Drop-In. We aim to enlighten people's mind through education and empowerment. Together, we are building the tools, resources, and strategies to empower people's minds, address trauma in our community, and start the process of healing. MAP is a neighborhood group organized on the core principle of practicing solidarity in times of crisis. In responding to the pandemic, we have been safely reaching out to hundreds of our neighbors and checking in on them to see what material and social support they need. We are building trust, care, and commitment with zero judgment. The Community Safety Committee formed in response to acts of harassment in our neighborhood and growing costs to build alternatives to policing. Apologies. Yeah, I did. My hand accidentally touched it. Sorry. The Community Safety Committee formed in response to acts of harassment in our neighborhood and growing costs to build alternatives to policing. We discussed ideas for how community members can keep each other safe, such as walk safe programs, rapid response teams, defending tenants during displacement or evictions, and other strategies to activate safer space throughout Parkdale. With the second wave of COVID-19 and sustained movements for racial justice and defunding the police, we have been hearing growing calls for community members to scale up and offer new forms of care and support in moments of crisis that do not rely on the police. Tonight's workshop, Fumbling Toward Possibilities, will explore principles and practices of transformative justice that can be used in our everyday lives. Sorry over that. Mercedes, could you go back? Sorry about that, yeah. I'm going to start over again. Sorry about that. Tonight's workshop, Fumbling Towards Possibilities, will explore principles and practices of transformative justice that can be used in our everyday lives to keep each other safer and to build mutual power in our communities. We will unpack our understandings of justice, consider what it looks like to transform harm and the roots of our harmful behaviors while reviewing different transformative justice tools in response to realistic conflict scenarios. And now I'll pass it on to Nati to do the workshop on Fumbling Towards Possibility. Thank you, Nati.
Thanks, Berlin. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Mercedes. I want to thank also Rachel and Anthony for supporting. And a big thanks to everybody who's here tonight. Yeah, it's nice to see some friendly faces too, or names in the Zoom world. Yeah, so my name is Natty Tremblay. I use they, them pronouns. I'm going to be running your workshop. I'm going to screen share shortly and because I have a cute slide deck. Everybody loves slides. And I just want to say a couple things. I personally, I use American Sign Language a little bit. And I, in particular, really appreciate this sign, which is thank you, and this sign, which is applause. And so if you see me doing that because you're sharing something great, that's, I'm not being like, why would you say that? I'm saying, yes, it's great. And this is, thank you. And this means, sorry. And I like to do those things as a way to just show I'm listening and I'm with you. And also to use different ways of communicating that. Okay, and then I just really invite everybody to participate in whatever ways feel good for you. The chat box will be watched and animated. We'll have some interactive moments, and I'm going to do my best to wrap us up in time to have a period for questions and reflections and all that good stuff. Okay, here we go. So let's see. This is going to be fumbly and awkward, and it just always is. Okay, here we go. And we'll just go there. Loading. Lovely. Can everyone see that? Great. Here we go then. So, yep, that's the title, Fumbling Towards Possibility. And I just want to like say that the reason I use fumbling towards possibility is because I feel like we fumble when we're not sure. We fumble when we're young and we're still, building confidence and strength in our legs. We fumble when we're disoriented. There's a whole host of reasons why we fumble. In the context of transformative justice, we are trying to hold old practices. We're bringing in new practices. And we're testing and experimenting in circumstances that are very difficult. And so there's no like one size fits all, or this is how you do it. And in fact, it's a lot of experimenting and making mistakes, which invites us to be humble together. So don't press the button. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. I mean, my bio's already been read, so that's really great. And it was beautifully read. Thank you so much. I will just give a shout out to Rittenhouse, where I work. I actually work at Sketch Working Arts as well, which is an organization that works with street-involved young people through the arts. And I train folks in transformative justice. And I also am the executive director of Rittenhouse, which is an abolitionist organization that's been operating in Toronto for 20 plus years. And has been actively engaged in education and capacity building with low-income and criminalized communities and incarcerated communities around transformative justice. So I'm real proud to work there. And if you're interested in like deeper trainings, Rittenhouse/I will be running trainings over the next few months. So you can check us out at www.rittenhouseanv.com. It'll be in my last slide. I'll say a couple times. I have different links to share in my last slide, and I suspect those will get shared out with y'all. Yeah, okay. There was a beautiful acknowledgement given. I love when that happens. I do want to just give a special acknowledgement to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant, and it was named in the acknowledgement. And I love that because I think it is an invitation for us to practice regenerative reciprocity, which is to say, to have relationships that are mutually beneficial, which is to say, to feel responsible with and for each other. And if I was going to distill some of the basic teachings of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, the image it's a belt made out of shells, and the image in the belt, and it's an old belt that gets renewed in ceremony every year. It was crafted in relationship between Haudenosaunee people and Anishinaabe people, Ojibwe people, who are very different people with very different language bases and cultures, but who have shared these territories for a long time. And they created this covenant before colonization, and they've renewed it through colonial times. And they invite people who are here to also be a part of that. So the first piece is accessing the resources you need, that you have a right and responsibility, in fact, to access the resources you need to live a good life. There's one spoon in the belt. And then the second agreement or term is that you have a responsibility for others to also get what they need. So that means you have to actually pass on that one spoon. You have to make sure that others are able to access it. Woo! Beautiful. And I'm distilling it. And then the third is that we're all responsible to care for, replenish, steward the Great Lakes Basin, which is like Toronto and well beyond. The abundance that was here and is here. We're invited to care for that. And if we do that, then we can continue to benefit from its abundance. And I think that those are some beautiful agreements to live by. I want to acknowledge and honor the legacies of women, in particular women who've organized around domestic, gender-based violence, childhood sexual assault. I want to acknowledge Two-Spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer communities. I want to acknowledge Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, disabled communities, and especially folks engaged in disability justice. I want to acknowledge poor folks and criminalized folks who have contributed to the archive, the histories of transformative justice work. They have been nurturing those seeds for a long time so that when society is and was ready, I mean, I feel right now we're in a moment where folks are like, what's this about? I want to learn more. And people have been nurturing transformative justice for a long time as a way to care for themselves and for their communities. And so I give thanks to them. And the last thing I want to acknowledge is that we will explore challenging content for sure. I personally, as a facilitator, will do what I can to hold the space with you in care. And I'm so thankful to have Beryl-Ann and Mercedes offering up active listening. It's a beautiful resource. And I invite you, if you notice anything coming up that feels like a trigger, or that just feels like tonight's not the night for you to deal with it, then I really invite you to care for yourself. And that's also a form of transformative justice, I would say. Yeah, and I give a shout out to my cute sketch of the tobacco plant. Okay, friends. So this is what we're going to be doing together. This is my aim. I like to be transparent. I want to build upon the good learning that y'all have been doing together in these amazing trainings over the last several weeks / months. Woohoo! I hope that y'all will see transformative justice as a movement and a culture that brings together diverse approaches to address harm, encourage accountability, keep our community safer, and produce alternatives to the carceral justice system. And I do intend to try and talk a little bit about all of those different things. But I do, that's probably my biggest goal. We will unpack how embedded punitive and carceral justice is in our brains, in the way we see and move through the world, how we interact with each other in our society and in our systems, the ways that we imagine and understand justice to be about punishment. I hope that you'll learn some tangible practices and applications of TJ for everyday life. This is a quick kind of summary. And, you know, I'd like to think that I'm going to plant some strong seeds in your minds and you'll be like, woo, I want more, I want more. And then hopefully we'll find each other again, or you'll find other opportunities to learn, because there's so much. And hopefully you'll come away with a sense that prioritizing communication, mutual aid, which y'all are already about, healing, and fair consequences and accountability over punishment, isolation, and victimization is really the way to go. I hope that you come away feeling like, yeah, I agree. I'm up for that. Okay, those are some of my goals. Let me know if I achieve them. Okay, cool. So we're gonna get into a little bit of an interactive thing, but before we do, I would love for you to just take a second and just like tune in with yourself. And I'm gonna ask a few questions just for you to just notice and reflect. And then we'll go into a bit of a group mapping, if you will. So we're gonna unpack what is justice. The first question I want you to think about is just what kinds of justice you experienced around you when you were growing up, when you were a kid. How did you know that that was happening? What did that look like? What kinds of justice did you experience or witness around you as a young person? And then I posed the question, what role did threats or punishments, coercion, which is to say manipulating, criminalization, which is to say that person, that act, those people are criminals, and banishment. What role did those things, those strategies play in the way justice manifested around you, the way you saw it played out on other people, or the way you experienced it in different spaces? And then I invite you to think about what this taught you about right and wrong, about good and bad, and about following the rules. Complicated concepts in themselves, right and wrong, good and bad, and about following the rules. Who defined those rules? Who polices them? Who benefits from that? Okay, sorry, too many questions. So we're gonna segue from that. So just keep those reflections with you. Let's see if this will work. I'll share this link in the chitty chat as well, or maybe since I'm screen sharing, that won't look so cool. If anyone else feels inclined to share the link in the previous slide, maybe you're not able to. Here we go. I'm just gonna do it like this. Can I do it? I don't think I can. Oh, screen sharing is not so slick. Okay, you know what? I'm just doing this, everybody. I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna copy and paste this into the chat in case anyone feels inclined to interact. No pressure, but if you want to, that would be cool. And back to presenting. Woohoo! And over to the Miro, which is a super cool tool introduced to me by the ever wonderful Sheila Sampath from the public. Okay, here we go now. Yes. And drop that guy in the chat if I could find the chat. I can't find the chat now. It's lost. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, everybody. Oh, there it is. Yeah. I kind of like this awkwardness of Zoom. Okay, there we go. Bingo bango. If you want to interact, it's an open link and you should be able to with relativities. Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, I see some folks there. Yay. Okay. So here we go. What is justice? So I've kind of organized these Post-it notes in a way so that, you know, we can answer questions in a structured way. So let's start with concepts and beliefs. When you were thinking about how you grew up, where you grew up, and even still to this day around you, what are some of the concepts and beliefs about justice? What justice is, how you achieve or experience justice? And I invite you, yeah, go for it. If you want to speak it, go for it. Unmute yourself, or if you want to type it in the chat, awesome. And we're going to capture it in here.
Can I go?
Go for it. Yeah.
For me, I see justice as a way of everybody should be treated equally, and there should be fairness. And even if it's for me, even when I was growing up, I see people, workers that were like, they work and they weren't paid. So for that reason, we had to one issue. Me and my mom and another worker, we went and we demanded the boss to pay up the worker. Eventually the guy gets paid because we put pressure on the boss. But put it this way, it was very cold that day, but we still went. I said, you know, this is my birthday gift. I want the worker to get paid.
Yes, I love that.
So the worker got paid. And what I see for justice, everybody should be treated equally, fairly, and yeah, that's what I see justice.
Love it. Thank you. And I noticed one of the capture, the note takers added that in our ideals. Thank you so much, because I think that's a beautiful ideal for justice, that we're all treated fairly and equally. And I wanted to name, I definitely I want to celebrate that people fight for their rights, which I think is and should be at least a concept or a belief in Canadian society about justice, that we have rights and you have a right to fight for your rights. Anyone else in terms of concepts and beliefs in a Canadian context? And maybe I'll come back to that third question. So what are concepts and beliefs about what is right and wrong in our society? And so too, what are some beliefs about how we should respond when someone does something wrong or someone breaks the rules?
I can share.
Go for it. Thanks, Berlin.
No worries. So then we punish them, you know. We punish them, you know, when I think of, you know, or we find them guilty, I should say, you know, before a trial, you know, or, you know, and so then, you know, even when, you know, concept too is, you know, so then, you know, as Black people or Indigenous people, so then they treated, you know, differently than Caucasian. So.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I want to like pick up on that, because I think I believe that there are very real reasons why certain peoples and communities are defined as criminal in order to keep people impoverished and in order to keep people afraid, people in competition with each other. And I see that as a part of our capitalist system, that we have to have an underclass of people. And also that we use things like media, we use things like religion and education and we use laws actually, and this is, we're getting into structures and practices, but we use laws to criminalize people. For example, sex workers, and sex work is still illegal. And that continues to perpetuate violence against women in particular, and sex workers and trans women. As an example, I think about how trans people only just recently got rights recognized only a few years ago. Gay marriage was only legalized about a decade ago, which is to say that it was criminal previously. And that then gives the power to the police, to the authorities, to police communities to stop people, frisk them, card them, collect information about them, log them in their databases, and charge people, beat them up, etc. Yeah, I see all of those things as part of a belief structure that believes that there are certain people that are criminal, that are inherently criminal. And that the only way to deal with that is with punishment.
What about the ones, Natty, who are have mental health issues? Usually when we see them, we see them dressed a certain way or look a certain way, we treat them a certain way. So
that's such a good example. I think of the way that the word crazy is used to define people as dangerous because they're different, or yeah, they're dressed a certain way. And crazy has been used to criminalize differently abled people that move and think and talk in different ways. Has been a way that mental health and access to mental health has been stigmatized, or coming out and talking about your experiences with mental illness has been stigmatized because it's viewed as criminal and dangerous. The ways that folks who experience mental illness are attacked in the streets, the ways that people don't, I think of civilians that see someone maybe in a mental health crisis in the street and don't stop and try and offer support. They just call the police. That's the first thing that they do because they're dangerous. Whee! Anyone else? So we've got here structures and practices of justice. So I'd love to name the police are a structure of our justice system. Our laws are a structure. Courts, lawyers, judges, all of which of course have access to legal jargon and knowledge that means that everyday people often can't access or participate fully in the processes and structures that our country sets out for folks to participate and have justice. Not to mention that you have to pay for it all. Not to mention that. What are other systems or structures of our justice system? Things that uphold or protect our justice. Oh yeah, thank you. Justice as a concept is that there is a right and wrong for every action, that an act, behavior, being, etc. is inherently right or wrong. Yaha, thank you for that. And I can't separate that from race, racism, classism, sexism, transphobia, schools. Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Yep. Hence why people call the schools a pipeline to the prison for racialized and low-income peoples, and especially Black and Indigenous young people. Prisons are a really big, very expensive, deeply embedded structure of our justice system.
How about transition houses, Nadi?
Yeah, totally. Good one. Yep. Yep. I think too about ways that we police each other without even necessarily involving the state or state systems, like making a judgment about someone, and even if they're in your community, and writing them off or banishing them. With young people, they experience this a lot over social media, being deplatformed. So if you've been called out for something that your community basically asks you to erase all of your social media platforms, or basically trolls you so intensely that you need to do that. Yep, banishment and isolation. I would say a concept of our justice system is that people are disposable. Certain people in particular, and especially if you know, the underpinning belief is that people can't change. Yes. The note takers are just doing great. Thank you so much. Anyone else on concepts and beliefs of our justice system, structures? And we'll segue now into some of the challenges or the impacts of our justice system. So the challenges of our prison system. And I would also include immigration detention centers and juvenile detention centers, border patrol. Ooh-wee. I'm going to say an impact for folks who experience on a regular basis being criminalized, trauma, deep distrust, fear when you're moving through the world, if you don't have status. I would say another impact of our justice system is that if you don't have money, it's very difficult to actually participate, whether or not you believe that it will work to your advantage. I put this question to folks: does our justice system actually provide healing for victims, or so like people who have been harmed by violence or crime? How many people can say, oh yeah, I witnessed that was a healing experience for folks? Not the same as that person experienced a form of retribution because the person who caused them harm was incarcerated. Thank you, Saroja. Heteronormativity, a belief that people should fall into certain gender roles and the social expectations that accompany that. That's right. And once again, if you're a trans person riding the subway and your gender doesn't fit with people's expectations, and I'm going to say especially if people read your body as masculine with feminine traits or clothing or ways of moving, that it is assumed that you are crazy, that there is something wrong with you. And I think transphobia, homophobia, and underlying that, sexism. Why would a man who inherits all the powers of patriarchy ever want to be like a woman? Which of course is a very simplistic understanding of trans identity. But whee! Thank you, Kate. Casting people into these identities of being a criminal or criminalized is damaging and can be hard to move past. Yes. And is the thing, if you've ever been charged, even for minor infractions, that follows you for the rest of your life. A small, like having possession of alcohol or a joint previously before it was legalized could end you up in prison or with serious charges that mean that you can't get employment in many ways. You can't work with children. You can lose your driver's license. Those are small things, let alone doing time for an extended period of time. And again, that follows you everywhere you go. It's very difficult to get employment after those experiences, not to mention all the violence that people experience in prisons and detention centers. And that's ironic and hypocritical because we say we're asking people to be accountable, to pay their rights back to society for causing harm. And do we believe that that means that a person has to suffer, be brutalized, experience violence, no longer have access to education, be exploited for their labor while in prison, versus getting healing and support and education and care? Oh my God, what a nominal idea. Yep. So, okay, I note the time. Did anyone want to speak? Maybe there was an unmuting. I may segue us into our ideals. What are ideals for justice? What do we want justice to look like and feel like? How do we know we're experiencing it truly? I love that everyone having their needs met was brought up. I know it was named that people are treated fairly and equally. What would you like justice for you to look like? If you think about an instance where you've experienced harm or violence or a crime.
To me, it would look like, you know, if the police show up on the scene, people don't have to feel scared, or, you know, we won't have to run, you know, because they mistrust the police. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they should be able to feel comfortable and, you know, and confident and, you know, in expressing itself. So.
Yeah. And I want to add to that, like that we have alternatives to calling the police, because I can think of a number of conflicts that I've supported through transformative justice where people who have a critical analysis about the police felt like that was their only option to protect someone who was experiencing a crisis. And knew, you know, I'm thinking of a friend who called and was like, please only send mental health, please, please, please don't send the police, please. And of course, they only sent the police, and it escalated things. Shoot. That's great. Accountability is important in justice. Thanks for sharing that, Shah. Yeah. And Kate shares, to be free from racism, colonialism, homophobia, and transphobia. Yes, yes, those are our ideals. Yes. That we no longer pass those oppressions and that trauma on to future generations.
In my experiences, when I think about how the question was posed, to think about like your personal experiences. So any experiences that I had where I was involved with like police in some sort of way, or like a crime had been committed, or like I was like the victim, so to speak. I always felt like nobody ever heard what I was actually saying, you know? So it's like nobody's listening to what you're saying, and they're responding to the way that they've been trained to respond to, which isn't what is actually happening in that moment, right? So that's one thing.
Thanks for that, Marcus. Yes. That makes me think, to me, an ideal is that I can be an active agent in processes of justice for myself and for other people that I care about in my community, right? Because we have, our system tells us everyday people have nothing to contribute. You're kind of just, you know, share your story a little bit, and then we'll make the decisions for you. You need professionals, you need lawyers, et cetera, to do this for you, rather than actually all of us have something to contribute, and we can be total agents. Woo! Kate shared also, to be developed and organized through the community with which it applies. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Any last things? This is a really great harvest right here. Anything we need? What do we need to accomplish these ideals? There's a couple of reflections on what are some things that we need right now to help us. Access to these resources should not cost so much money. Yaha. Free access to resources to defund the police. Redirect those resources to community services. Yes, yes.
I would say, Natty, to unlearn some of those, you know, beliefs that you know, is not helpful to us in today's society.
Yes, the bias. Yes.
You know, and then, you know, help people relearn things that's going to be more beneficial to them in society. And then, you know, I like to say each one teach one, you know, where we, you know, we are a neighbor's keeper, where we teach each other, you know, we help each other, we support each other, you know, instead of relying on the police, you know, we're gonna, you know, be our neighbor's keeper, so we don't need to rely on the police. You know, we can look out for each other and help and support each other. So I think that, you know, those are what we need, but we need to we have a lot of unlearning to do first.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marilyn. Oh yes, each one teach one. Thanks for bringing that in. Shah says we need education and training like today's workshop. Yes, 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 more of this. And Ivy says empathy and patience. Yeah, empathy and patience. Couldn't agree more. Humility is a big one. As we get into the work of struggling through conflict and crisis together, we will make mistakes. We will make tons of mistakes. And so our ability to be humble with each other, to not scrutinize so intensely that you made this mistake and you're out of here and this whole thing is a failure and it's a fraud. We're fumbling towards possibilities. Great humility. Woo-wee. Okay, we've got a roadmap, everyone. Workshop's done. No, I jest. Sweet. Okay. Thank you so much to the note takers. That's a beautiful collection. I will get a JPEG of this and add it into the slides because I know these things are going to be shared with y'all. Here we go. Back over to this groovy slideshow. And we're going to scooch this over here like this. Oh, goodness. Okay. Sorry, the Zoom. Okay, here we go. So what is transformative justice? What the heck is this? I have to tell you, my friends, I have this conversation a lot with people who have actually been in TJ workshops or have done some reading, and they would say, I don't think I do, TJ. I'm not sure I understand what it is, but I do provide a lot of listening for people. I am a helper in community. I do offer therapeutic resources for folks. And then I think, that's TJ. That's totally TJ, because it's a really broad thing. And I hope that y'all come away with that. But so I have this image of a ball, a really enormous mound of knotted yarn. And I think of this as a really good metaphor. And I think I named this metaphor in the navigating conflict and crisis because it is a good metaphor for understanding how we get at the root of things, rather than thinking about it in a linear way, or I'm just going to get some facts and evidence and make a decision and a judgment. There are many hands here. There are many threads. If you take one thread and pull it, it'll create a bigger knot. Rather, it requires a lot of gentle maneuvering and nuance and working together until you get to the bottom of that big pile of knots. So transformative justice is a number of things. It for sure is about transforming a crisis or conflict through building understanding with those who are impacted by that crisis or conflict. And there's a host of different strategies you can use, but a core goal is that there's deepened understanding about what has happened, how it's impacted people. With that deepened understanding, creating agreements together that are sustainable, creating agreements that everyone contributes to, and developing strategies together to uphold them, to reevaluate them, to tweak them as needed. That's one basic thing about transformative justice. It is about transforming harm by centering survivors, focusing on safety, focusing on harm reduction, and supporting healing. So not, you need to prove your story, you need to prove that this happened, I'm gonna put you on trial, and rather, I'm centering your experience, I'm listening. I may not necessarily understand as someone who's supporting you, but I'm centering your experience and focusing on all the resources that you can bring around a person to support them to access safety, harm reduction, and healing. And this is short and long term. Transformative justice is definitely about transforming the behaviors and beliefs that lead to harm and harmful behavior, harmful practices, and supporting people to be accountable. And again, there's a host of different ways that we can do this, but that is not necessarily about punishing, but for sure about fair consequences. And it's not about criminalizing, but it is about asking people to be accountable and measuring that accountability over time. What have you learned so that you don't replicate that action again? Do you understand why it's harmful? What do you need to understand that it's harmful and to change that behavior? And then fourth, and this is why I think transformative justice is so powerful. It's not just about individuals and relationships, because restorative justice is a bit more of a focus on those relationships and restoring and repairing existing relationships. Transformative justice is also about getting at the deep roots of things. It's transforming the social and economic conditions that cause and perpetuate harm, trauma, scarcity, dishealth, violence, and distrust. If we say, oh, this person keeps stealing from their neighbors, rather than saying they're a criminal and they're always going to steal and let's lock them away, let's get at why that behavior is happening. More often than not, that's happening because people experience economic scarcity. And they have experienced intergenerational economic scarcity. So to really transform behavior, you do have to transform the conditions that perpetuate those practices, those behaviors, those circumstances, that desperation. Which means hopefully that everyone can see themselves in this work, that they have a role to play. Okay. Next slide here now. I think I can just click on it. Yes, okay. So some core principles of TJ. And I just want to name. So this is just some core principles. And I'm going to say that every single one of these are very complicated. And you might notice that you have a resistance or a feeling like, whoo, that sounds good in principle, but in practice, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like. And this is just a beginning place. But so one core principle is that no one is disposable, which is to say that no one deserves to be disposed of, that we need everyone in our circles. It also suggests that we will keep working with a person that has caused harm. We aren't going to banish them. We are going to try and figure out ways to work with them. No one is disposable. Even if we really disagree with someone, even if we really dislike them, and that is not easy to practice. No one is disposable. Anyone can heal and change. Anyone can heal and change, but support actually almost always helps with this. Absolutely. An individual on their own can decide I want to change and I'm going to do the work I need to heal so that I can change. But it almost always is substantially more successful, deep-rooted when it's supported by other people who are affirming and holding you accountable. Woo-wee. So then I think a question is, do you feel like you have the capacity to support someone that's caused harm? Do you have the capacity to walk alongside someone who's harmed someone that you care about? Who is it? Who is best equipped to do that work? It's an important question to ask ourselves. Anyone can be harmed or cause harm. This principle is really important because we can also in our society have a tendency to say that certain groups of people are always victims or easy to victimize, or that some groups of people cannot be victimized or cannot be the victims of violence. And that leaves out a lot of stories and can perpetuate harm. It also suggests that in a conflict that you're supporting, a person could come to you and share, I've been harmed by this person. And you may realize over time, with a nuanced analysis of a conflict, that maybe both parties have caused harm, which is not to hierarchize or justify harm, but to understand that a person who has been harmed can also cause harm. And often that is the case. People who have been harmed harm other people, especially if we learn this from an early age. Even if your family doesn't teach you that, you learn it in the world around us, in mainstream media, in our education, our justice system, and we're rewarded for it. We're rewarded for being violent, brutal, taking advantage of people. That's the crux of capitalism. Sorry. I digress. Addressing conflict and harm requires capacity for nuance. Thanks, Marcus, for that heart. And as I named with the image about the many hands working with this knot, in order to work through a conflict, it's super important to not try and go to the quickest answers, the easiest answers, or decisions or judgments, and rather to hold space for nuance, to invite diverse perspectives to see that nuance, even if there are oppositional truths, which is to say a truth, two truths that suggest like if this truth exists, then this one has to be untrue. Oh, what if they both need to exist in some sort of way because both parties or multiple parties have different understandings of what happened? Ooh-wee. Whoa. Yes, nuance. Okay, this is a really big one. This is where we can start doing the work yesterday. Bias, judgment, stigma, silence, isolation, discrimination, and the criminalization of people are destructive forces in transformative justice processes. If you are supporting a conflict or a crisis and you notice that's showing up in your analysis or the way you're treating someone, you have to pause. Is that going to serve the process? Is that going to serve getting at fair consequences and at healing? Or is it something deeper that you need to do some work around? Super important for us to understand that, because all of us have biases about who is criminal, who is dangerous. Okay. TJ requires diverse skills, perspectives, and approaches. I've already named that. I just think it's so true. I look at this beautiful image turning towards each other. So this is a free workbook around conflict. There's a link in my last slide. It's beautiful and also has some really great resources, meditations, activities. You can totally go through that with a group of people and reflect on it. It gives case studies to explore. It's beautiful. And I love this image, you know, because it's a group of diverse people sitting together, turning towards each other, committing to the hard work of working it out. It also reflects that in order to get at complex conflicts, we need a diversity of perspectives. We need as many people as possible who have understanding about a thing to feed into it, which is not easy to facilitate and to manage. It's also suggests that everyone has something they can contribute and gain from participating in transformative justice. So anytime someone says, what is that? And I don't know if I can do that. You know, anything that they do that is a part of contributing to mutual aid, care, helping, that's a part of the work. And we'll get at what I mean by that. But another really core principle from the beginning to the top to the end is building at the pace of trust. And I give a shout out to Adrienne Marie Brown, Black queer feminist organizer and thinker who coined this term, building at the pace of trust. So don't build a new thing until you're assured there's trust in this thing that we have. Work with people that you have trust with, incorporate folks who you don't have trust with the explicit intention of building trust. Create means of building relationships that are trusting all along the way is really critical. Woo-wee. Every one of those points could be its own workshop. Here we go now. Okay. So this image is just to, I'm not going to go over everything here, but this image is just to give a sense of some of the aspects of transformative justice in practice. Every one of these Post-it notes is a role, is a tool, is an approach, is a resource, is a community of people in practice. You might look at these and see yourself, food justice, I'm all about food justice. That can be a part of transformative justice? Amazing. Well, yes, if someone continues to find themselves in conflict because they continue to find themselves hungry and without housing, how can we expect people to negotiate and have agency when they're hungry and unhoused? Food justice, or they're not accessing good quality food. Food justice is a critical part, the roots of transformative justice. Free detox and rehab, safe spaces, green spaces. I can't even tell you how many times I have been able to de-escalate a conflict by going to a park, sitting with someone in a green space and witnessing them grounding because they're surrounded by nature. We need green spaces. Those of you who do that advocating work. And there's so many other things here. I do want to speak to some of the TJ approaches in the middle, and I will describe some of them when we do a little case study. And again, like if you're interested in doing a deeper dive in TJ, get in touch with me, because I do like 4-week series and other intensive trainings where we look at all these different things and how you would use them depending on the conflict or scenario. But so some examples, care webs. So in your life before a conflict even happens, having an actual drawing, a map for yourself of the people who you could rely on if you needed care. And if you sat down and you're like, oh, I don't even know if I have any people that I could rely on, or I feel too vulnerable to ask, that's a place for you to build, because every person should have a care web of people that they can contact when they need support, when they need to process, when they're in an emergency and they need someone to come pick them up. Everyone deserves to have that. Are you in a care web for someone? Have you made it explicit? Here's an opportunity to do that. Imagine drawing care webs and then gifting that to someone and being like, you're one of my core people in my care web and I love you so much. What a gift. TJ mentors. I'm just going to name a few of these. That's people who have practiced TJ. They're not professionals. And I want to say, TJ should not be an institutionalized profession. It should be something that everyday people in their communities have access to and practice. It's great to pay people to educate. Thank you for being paid. Thank you to run this workshop. But my hope is not to continue running these workshops to pay my rent. My hope is that more people get into the movement and are able to hold transformative justice in their work. So a TJ mentor would be someone who's done some processes and can give input, can consult. And elders who have addressed conflict, they're great for that. Oh my goodness. Circle keeping. It's an indigenous practice of sitting in circle together having a non-hierarchical conversation where every voice gets centered. You pass a talking piece, a feather. There is ceremony in there. There are a lot of different ways that you can approach circle keeping, but I'm going to say it's a technology as refined as the internet, because it's been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years as a way to work through conflict and to come up with agreements. And that is also a skill that you could develop for sure. Mediation, caring interventions, an intervention coming from a place of love, safety planning, we'll come back to that. And we talked about this a little bit in the navigating conflict. If someone is in trouble, sitting down with them and mapping what are the resources that could help you access safety, short-term and long-term. Well, I'll come back to this. Contact trees is part of a mutual aid strategy, that you have a list of people who you could call in an emergency and you know that they are reliable. Woo! Contact trees. Okay. Anyway, I can't cover all of them, but I hope that you see just in this little map, which of course doesn't even include all of the things that are a part of a transformative justice approach to addressing conflict and harm, that you might fit in here. Okie dokie. Oh, I should say, of course, the North Star, which is to say, anytime you're like, I can't see where I'm going. What are we doing here? I'm fumbling. The North Star, when you're in the woods at night, is about wellness for yourself and your community, freedom for yourself and your community, and regenerative reciprocity, which means that in our exchanges, we benefit. It's mutually beneficial, and we thrive because of our relationships and our exchanges. Woohoo! Parkdale's people's economy, they know all about it. Exchange economies. Okay. On to the next slide. If at any point in time you want me to go back or slow down, just type it in the chat. I propose we consider a scenario. So if you have materials to write, I invite you to just take some notes to think through some approaches, okay? And I will walk through some strategies as well. And the things you want to think about when conflict is brought to you is, for sure, what are your immediate steps? And in particular, how to address immediate risks for safety. And then you will hopefully have some time to create other structures and resources to support. So this is the scenario that I propose. And I propose it because, unfortunately, I think a lot of people have been touched by this particular example of violence and harm. A friend and community member reaches out to you to relay that she has been experiencing mounting violence and ongoing abuse from her partner, who she lives with. She wants to leave, but isn't sure how to. She worries that leaving will put herself and her children at risk, that it will escalate things. She is worried because she relies on her partner financially. That's a power dynamic. You also know her partner and some of their family members from being in community together. And there could be more details, but I leave it at that. So some of the first questions to ask yourself: what are immediate steps that I can take? What can you do to plan for and support more safety and stability in your friend's life? Who can you tap in for support? And that's a big one. Never do this work alone. Never. It's not sustainable. It will burn you out. It is dangerous. How will you sustain your efforts over time? And these are some big questions that people ask all the time and must throughout transformative justice processes. How will we measure successes? How will we define failures? How will we know? We'll keep coming back to it. So that's the scenario. And I want to propose some strategies in a transformative justice framework that one could use, okay? Whee! I'm just going to do a time check. 7:05, okay, doing great. So the first piece, always encourage communication. Often in instances of violence and harm, people go silent because they don't feel like they're going to be believed. They don't feel like they're going to be heard. They feel like they're going to be blamed. It is stigmatized. They're worried that they will be criminalized, etc. So whatever you can do to encourage communication, open, honest communication, creating safe space for that, listening deeply, taking notes so that you can remember, and asking clear questions that aim to understand how this person understands what has happened, the impact on them, how they feel about it, and especially their needs, their short-term needs. So in the context of this friend who's reached out, trying to understand, so, you know, what has happened recently that makes you feel like you need to leave? Just so I understand. What has been the impact on you? What do you need tonight? What would you need tomorrow? A place to stay? Okay. A car? Okay. This is also a segue into creating a safety plan for someone. And a safety plan is an incredibly useful tool, especially if someone is in crisis, which is to say their nervous system is activated, they're triggered, they're in a fear mode. So they might be sharing things from that place, and also they might, after the fact, have a hard time remembering your conversation or all the details. So writing things down helps a person be able to go back to what you said, but it also visualizes for a person what you're talking about. So safety plan is looking at who are 3 people that you could call right now if you needed to, that you could call and that you trust. Let's write their names down and their phone numbers. Who are 3 people or places that you haven't contacted before, but that you could, like Parkdale Queen West Community Health Center, this particular person at that center, or Rosalie Edwards from the Parkdale Women's Leadership Group. Okay, yeah. And that is where you can give input, right? With care and humility. What about this person? What about your mom? What would be the risks there? And talking through that. Because often also when folks are in that state of fear and nervous system super triggered, the world shrinks and it's hard to see the resources around you. And if you can't see and feel the resources around you, it's impossible to make active choices, different choices to negotiate. So that's super critical. Identifying places that a person can go short-term and long-term, writing that down, the addresses. Identifying transportation options, writing that down that's viable. If the person is financially reliant on someone else, what are free modes of transportation? Who are people that they can call to get a ride? If finances are an issue because they're reliant on someone else, food will be an issue. Transporting their children will be an issue. Other issues might be their kids go to a school and that your friend is worried that their partner will show up at the school after leaving. So a safety plan is also for that person's children. And so you see how we're writing down other people who we can tap into a web of support and care. And again, that's short term, like tonight, this is what we'll do if you need to leave tonight. And next week and through this month, this is what we can do. And then you leave that safety plan with that person. If you're going to part ways, it's their safety plan. So making sure that you map it in a way that they can access it and use it. In my resources, the last slide, there's a link to a really cool interactive digital safety plan. And you could sit with someone on your phone or on a computer and ask some questions, input that information, and it will generate a sort of safety plan for them, depending on who they are, what their needs are, et cetera, which is kind of cool. But you can also Google safety plan templates and come across a whole bunch of different versions. You can also make your own, which is beautiful. Always put the person at the center. That's the safety plan piece. After you have done some deep listening with the person, you've created a safety plan and you've identified people they trust and people they might be willing to trust. And you've arranged things with them and some immediate supports to get them into a place of safety and their children, and also to support them with, at the very least, access to food and transportation. Then you want to shift into creating support pods. Creating a support pod or web or circle, however you want to describe it, or group of people who will move with that person for a period of time. And so that could, should, would be friends, family members, community leaders, mentors. It doesn't have to necessarily be people that your friend knows, but definitely people that are trustworthy and that can offer supports and skills. And I recommend having that group meet as soon as possible. And in the early throes, when a person is in great crisis, meeting a couple times a week. That has immense impact on a person. They feel listened, they feel held, you help them generate strategies, you're in touch with each other. It has immense impact for someone who has been harmed by violence and conflict, especially ongoing abuse. So the focus of those support pods for someone who's been harmed for your friend would be, what can help you find grounding and healing today? And that might just be, teas, might be connecting to an elder, traditional healer, or therapy. And that is always a challenge, how to find a therapist that is free and is good and is culturally suitable, etc. Another reason to generate that resource more. Focus on healing primarily. What's going to help you feel better resource? Feel like your feet are on the ground. That could include readings, that could include videos, it could include workshops about healing, but those are, longer term strategies. Sometimes just coming together and processing, because the person will for sure process and will potentially shift their feeling about what has happened, experience doubt, wonder if they should go back to their partner, wonder if they should call the police. All of these things will surface in a support pod for someone who's been harmed. That's your third step. A fourth step, if you assess with that person you're supporting, and you assess based on your knowledge of that person who's caused harm, would be to form a support pod for them that is focused on accountability. And to name that both pods, in the creation of those pods, there's delicate work involved in bringing people in, because people are not familiar with these things right now. Though we do it, I think, in our families and in our close friendships. But to go up to someone who, as a leader or a mentor, and to ask them to participate in something like this, there's a skill in that. But if you're a talker, if you're a charmer, if you have a relationship with people, if people know you, then you have great assets that you can contribute to the formation of support circles, support pods. So creating one for the person who's caused harm is also critical if it's possible, because that can and hopefully will support that person to recognize the harm they've caused and to change those behaviors. And that's actually how you long-term provide safety for your friend who's been harmed. And that's how long-term you hopefully can assure other people in your community that person isn't going to do that again to someone else. And that person isn't just going to bounce to another community and do the same thing again. That's the ideal long-term strategy. But it's hard to create accountability pods because often people don't want to do that, especially if you heard, oh, that guy's, no, I don't want people to know that I'm associated with him. That's real. That's where we get back to the known is disposable and anyone can change. So that pod focuses on, let's talk about what happened. How have you been impacted? Centering that person's voice to an extent, trying to understand their perspective, and also stewarding, holding, hosting the stories of the person who's been harmed, the truths of the person that's been harmed, the requests for consequences and boundaries that that person has expressed. And that's super important. It's super important to have a period of time where there are clear boundaries and clear terms about consequences if those boundaries are broken. And that is a way that a person can show that they're invested in accountability by respecting those boundaries. That's not a punishment. It's a fair consequence for harm that a person has caused. Different from, you are banished from our community. We never want to see you again. Deplatformed, you'll never work in this town again. Very different. And then over time, when there's trust in that circle with the partner of your friend who's caused harm, talking about the impacts on his children and getting at what's the root of these behaviors. Why are you violent? Where is that coming from? Why does that come out on your partner? What are your actual beliefs about violence? ... Workshops, having elders, folks who that person will respect. And sometimes, to be honest, having people who can apply a little bit of leverage, which is to say, we really want you in our church, in our faith group. We really want you in this space, and we believe that you can do this work of accountability, but the consequence for your actions is that you need to focus on this circle of accountability until we can welcome you back in. And that's a fair consequence. Okay, that's the pods. In both pods, you create agreements that you revisit regularly and that they're ideally in parallel, but they might not be, which is to say, your friend who's been harmed might say, I don't ever want to talk to that person again. I don't want to hear from him. You can tell him, I just never want to see him again. That's it. And so those two pods can be in communication, but they're not communicating on behalf of the two people. They might just be reporting to each other. This is the process that we're on. This is where this is the successes, this is the challenges, etc. So folks have a sense of that transformative justice process. But the ideal, and again, a part of rebuilding trust, healing, transforming harm, is to revisit agreements, to sustain them, to show accountability, and to build on them. And if you find an agreement is unfair, or it's not sustainable, or it's not being addressed or responded to appropriately, then you roll back. You roll back. Okay, we're going back. You have to narrow things down a little bit. I hope that makes sense. And again, always parameters of accountability. For the next 6 months, we ask you, partner of our friend, to not go near the kids' school. We ask you to not go to church for 6 months, to find connection with religious folks or faith keepers in other ways. And we ask you to go to this workshop series. I will say, unfortunately, there's not enough workshops and programs specifically around toxic masculinity. I'm just going to say, we need more of that. We need more of that. I'm going to shout out good guys, and there are some groups, but we need more of that. If there are any folks who are interested in that kind of programming, if that's something you can build as part of the TJ movement. Okay, so say now you've been hosting a circle with your friend for a couple months. She's got some stable housing, and she's got her own means of generating an income, and she feels relative safety for herself and for her kids. Great. And she's been accessing therapy, so she's been able to get at, like, what have been the impacts? What's the trauma that you've experienced because of this violence? And what is, also talking about the dynamic in their relationship. Because you may often find, as I stated before, that there is harm across parties. Again, it's not a hierarchy, but it is important to acknowledge harm either way. And perhaps your friend's partner decides, yep, I'm gonna do this work. He's inspired to do this work. And I want to name, I am using she and he, but it's arbitrary. These could be gender fluid people. He could refer to a trans man, ... just to name. I don't want to replicate stereotypes, that's for sure. So both parties have moved through their accountability processes. The partner has participated in the workshops, has for the most part shown good faith. Perhaps you decide in both of your pods that it could be a time to bring either both parties or representatives from those pods together in a full circle. And we'll have a conversation, and we'll talk about what we understand has happened, how it impacted us, what you've been thinking and feeling about since then. Where did that dynamic or those behaviors come from? What do you need to make things right? And you invite not just the two parties, but their supports, again, folks in their pod, could be their family members, folks who have been impacted. You invite them into a circle. It's really important to have a skilled circle keeper for very complex circles, but I think anyone who can be with conflict can be a circle keeper. And if you're interested in those skills, holler at me, because there are ways to build those skills. And again, I want to just recognize that Indigenous peoples around the world have been using circles for a long time. Whee! So maybe you have a 4-hour circle with 10 people or 15 people, and everything gets brought out in the middle. Everything gets said. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of emotion. You start the circle with ceremony. You have a ceremony in between to help people stay grounded, whatever ceremony means to you in the group of people. And then you come back to our agreements currently. These are our agreements. What else do we need? Do we need new agreements, deepened agreements? Anything else that we need to say in this circle? Any agreements that are articulated, you write them down and make sure that both groups have them. And often those circles, if people have been able to do some of the work or get some of the grounding and resourcing needed to feel fuller in themselves, to feel wellness, to have some healing on their own, in their own journey, they might be able to come together and hear each other's perspectives and move through that together. It doesn't mean that people forgive each other. It doesn't mean things are forgotten and we move forward. In fact, it means we've had a deeper, more nuanced conversation by being together. Not every transformative justice process can hold a circle. They can be very dangerous, in fact, in the wrong circumstances. But they can also be incredibly transformative, incredibly transformative. So that's a place where, you know, you can get mentorship or consult with folks about when is the right moment to do this. Beyond that, you know, a circle can clarify, and you can have many circles. I do want to say that. You can also explore having circles that don't include both parties. You can decide that your TJ process is entirely focused on your friend because their partner doesn't want to participate. He continues to resist, thwart, deny. Then the consequence is that that person hasn't built trust. And unfortunately, that might involve them being, I don't want to say banished. And I am thinking about my Two-Spirit elder, Blue Waters, who would say, if a person has been shown care and has been given information and opportunity, yeah, Marcus, to do their work, and they continue to resist and they continue to resist, they are draining their community. That can happen. And as a community, we have a responsibility to tell that person, we've worked with you for this amount of time, we've returned to this several times, and we don't see you doing your work. So now we have to have harder consequences for you. You will not be invited to community events. It will not be safe for you to be here. We will not allow you to put our community at risk. For a year, we ask you to go do these things on your own. Or for a period of time, we ask you to do these things on your own. We can't keep putting this energy in you. But that's after coming back to processes several times with a person, because people will relapse. They will. People will deny. People will resist. And that interplay, that balance is hard to figure out. It's hard to figure out. And I'll say I've actually supported a lot of people who have caused harm. And it's a very hard process. It's a very hard process. But I just return to, I would rather invest my energy and time in this than to lose that person to the prison industrial complex. Those are our choices. And I say that while believing firmly that we can't burn out and we have to find strategies to do this sustainably. So after we've done that work and agreements have been laid out and we're on a path, we can think about prevention, like community education resources and strategies to reduce stigma so that folks know that it's important to talk about harm and violence. It's important to talk about mental illness. It's important to talk about the traumas that maybe make it hard for you to negotiate in certain circumstances when you're triggered. It's really important to talk about those things. So that's, again, where if you're an artist, how do you animate those ideas? If you're an educator, how do you animate those ideas? And y'all are already doing that. Y'all are already doing that. And then, as we've already talked about, we organize to address the deeper social and systemic issues, like targeted poverty, which is to say the intentional impoverishment of specific people and groups, homelessness, mental illness, trauma, addictions, food injustice, the criminalization of particular groups of people, all kinds of organizing work we can do. Oh my God, though, you guys are in Parkdale, and Parkdale is infamous for this. Woo! Those are just some approaches that you could strategize around, in particular around this particular conflict that has been brought to you. And we could do workshops in every one of these individual points, and there's so much that could be said. And I'll just take a pause.
I just don't like the cockroaches.
Oh, cockroaches. Rosa, just letting you know that you're unmuted. But
oh my God, I'm so sorry.
That's good. I was like, that's a good metaphor right there. I just wanted to share these posters because these are examples, I think, of community organizing, campaigns for education. And these were specifically made by Project NIA, which is an amazing organization that's been doing transformative justice work for 20 plus years. They've generated lots of resources. So like go to their website because they make everything free, open source. But I love these. Strong communities make police obsolete. Conversation, not cruelty, right? Let's focus on actually talking to each other and what do we need to be able to do that in a meaningful way. Consequences, fair consequences, not incarceration. Woo-wee! Yes, and every one of these posters has a campaign with tools connected to them in case you're like, yeah, I want to dig deeper into consequences, not incarceration. You can do it. It's free. Okay, cool. How are we doing for time? Okay. Some hard questions, friends. These are some hard questions that anyone engaged in addressing conflict and harm has to deal with, and they're still very real in transformative justice. Each one of these questions could be a point of discussion. And if any of these stick out to you that you're like, I really want to work on that, bring it back to the question and answer period or message me and let's jam about it over coffee. Okay. So this case study as an example and all the strategies that I described very quickly, and I'm sorry. What if the people who've been harmed have also caused harm? What if they don't acknowledge that? But the person who is being described as the perpetrator or the abuser is saying time and time again, I also experienced harm. I also experienced violence. This is a one-sided conversation. What do you do about that? To that effect, what if both parties just cannot agree on the facts, on what happened? What do? Do you have to choose sides? What if those harmed decide they want retribution, which is to say, I'm gonna call my friends up and we're gonna just break that person's knees. And I'm like, I use that like, because it's an actual thing that I witnessed. Oh my gosh. Or they wanna call the police. They wanna call the police. They feel like that's the only measure that they have at their disposal. What do you do? What do you do if that's after you've actually got a TJ process in place? You've been working with a person for a while. What if someone harmed wants to return to their abuser? What if you help them get a place, you help them get a job, everything, you put all these things in place, and then they call you up and say, yeah, I moved back in with my ex. What if? Centering the survivor. What if you had a hard time believing or trusting those who've been harmed? What if you've been asked to support someone who's been harmed, but you have a hard time believing that what they're saying actually happened, or ... whether that's because of your relationship, because of bias, because of stories being told about that person, because their stories change, ... I've been there, very complicated. What if you're legally obligated to notify authorities about violence or harm? So if you are, you're working for an agency, for example, if you're a social worker, if you're an educator, as an example, if a young person tells you that they are experiencing violence at home, you are technically legally obligated to contact the police. What do you do? What if that, really is against your beliefs, but it's also the policy of the place you work at? I'm thinking of an institution in this city that does work with marginalized communities, but their policy is that if people are loitering on their property, they will call the police on them. And that's almost always young racialized people smoking joints on their property. Anyway, I would take that as a compliment, just saying. What if those being held accountable resist, break trust, or pretend to participate? How do you assess that if they pretend to participate? So they're coming to the circles, but they're not really doing the work. They're not really doing the work. How do you assess that? What do you do? Because they can say, well, I've been coming to the meetings. I'm here, aren't I? What if those being held accountable go through processes and still continue to cause harm? You've been in a process for 6 months with someone, and then you get contacted that this person did the same thing to someone else recently. Similarly, what if you find out that that person who caused harm hurt other people in the past, and now because it's being spoken about, all these people are contacting you to let you know, this person did this to me, this to me. Can you hold all of that? Is it your responsibility? Whee! What if those who cause harm are people in positions of power and leadership in your community? Also witnessed this many times, because community rallies around a person and says, no, it's not possible. This person would never do that. Never. Never. We don't believe it. Also, usually those people in power already have communities of support around them. What if the person who's been harmed has no community of support around them? They wouldn't even know who to tap in. versus someone who's caused harm who has lots of people they can tap in. Or conversely, if either parties don't have a lot of people around them for support. In your support pod, you're in a support pod, you've been working together for a while. It's urgent, the work is urgent, the crisis is starting to diminish, but you realize we're burnt out. Our ability to communicate and sustain this work is breaking down. It's affecting our trust. Or you realize actually what we've agreed to is not sustainable for us as people with our own lives. Then what do you do? These are some of the big questions that surface and that we have to grapple with in our transformative justice work. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I don't know if you could see that glitching. Okay. How are we doing for time? Okay, yeah, we're doing good. So this is my last slide before we get to the question and answer period. Okay, everybody? And again, it's just a summary. I gotta make this go small. Here we go. I'm sorry to not see your beautiful faces. Fumbling towards a culture of healing justice. So this is a bit of a mission statement for us, if you will, a summarized mission statement, okay? As we fumble towards a culture of healing justice. So not just response to harm and violence, but that it's in the way we live. And healing justice is like a worldview, an indigenous worldview that is ingrained in the way kids are raised, elders are treated, how we work in the world, how we acknowledge our spirits and our skills, all of that being rooted in a healing justice so that we have a lot more prevention in place, that people are already familiar with some of the strategies like communication, accountability. It's a part of the web of our communities, healing justice, not just a response when something happens. So as we fumble, we acknowledge that we are learning as we go. We will make mistakes. We're testing new and traditional approaches within a capitalist and colonial context that suggests that it won't work, that will even punish us sometimes for trying. We are organizing within and against immense structures of oppression and violence that get rewarded. As I said before, capitalism is a system that rewards brutality, violence, taking advantage of, trying to dismantle rights and protections in order to extract labor, resources to make money. That's what it's about. We get rewarded for participating. We don't get rewarded for resisting. We're working with histories of intergenerational trauma that will take a long time to heal. We are often under-resourced in our work. We know this work is incredibly difficult. It is, and it's incredibly urgent. And that adds an incredible pressure on anyone who steps into this work. And we believe this work can ground, inspire, empower, and uplift us and our communities. In fact, we know it. We believe this work offers possibilities for healing, which we need and deserve, building relationships, which is what mutual aid is all about, relationships, caring for each other, keeping each other safe, developing accountable communities, which is to say that it becomes a regular practice. So it's not something that has to be kicked in when something happens. People already are invested in accountability as a way of being with each other. And leading our justice and making prisons obsolete. Leading our justice, which is to say we are active agents in our justice. We don't need other people to do it for us. And through that work, we will make prisons obsolete. We will. We believe in the dreams of mutual aid, which is to say caring for each other, providing resources for each other, developing that whether or not we get paid or it's our job, being in service of community. We believe in collective wellness, that we all deserve to have wellness, and we are likely more able to access that wellness when we strive for it together. And regenerative reciprocity, which is, I will refer to this image of the birds eating service berries, which are a very generous and abundant berry that grows on trees all across Canada. There's a link in the last slide to a really good podcast that explains the concept of regenerative reciprocity, which I think is as important as understanding anti-oppression, systems of advantage and disadvantage, intersectionality. Regenerative reciprocity to me is an end game, which is that we can say that the majority of our relationships are mutually beneficial, which means I have to ask you what you need. I have to listen to what you say. You have to do the same thing. And we work at that relationship of reciprocity. Hallelujah. And lastly, we will build our personal and community principles and practices through day-to-day organizing, art, culture, spirituality, until it is second nature, like breathing. Okay, that's the manifesto I propose. That brings us, my friends, to an open period for questions, reflections, and ideas. I will stop sharing so that we can all see each other. As ever, I'm sorry to screen share and take over your screens. It feels weird. Woohoo, we got a little bit of extra time. Okay, sorry if I went too fast. Okay, does anyone have any questions in terms of any of the strategies or scenarios you'd want to propose, or questions about how you could get involved, or ...
Maddie, there is a question, or at least like a reflection in the chat already from Kate. Kate, I'm curious if you might want to share a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, it just like, it made me think a lot about like what cancel culture is in our society, and how we just like have this like social media phase where someone does something that's bad and then we just cancel them or remove them, but we're not actually like holding them accountable or building them back up or like doing anything. It's just like the solution is just eliminate them and disgrace them and get rid of them. And I just think it's just, I felt like for a long time that it just like feels like it's so problematic. And I don't know, I just feel like learning more about this really helped me kind of put that into perspective.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. And the issue is that we're not actually protecting anyone by doing that. Like if that person has deeply ingrained harmful practices or behaviors or beliefs, they're going to keep doing that. Just because we cancel them, they could easily go to another place, another community. That's one piece. We could say, well, I'm not responsible for that. But they may also continue to cause harm in our communities, for sure. And of course, to go deeper, yeah, if we believe no one is disposable, then how can we actually engage them in work? And I feel like that's a place where, like seeing the difference between calling out versus calling in. And I know that like there's a lot of different opinions about that. But I think generally anyone who's been called in and called out can identify, can name the differences. That is like a call out is to put you on blast, to shame you, to make you feel horrible about yourself, and perhaps to explicitly say, you're out of here. Versus a call in, which is like, we need you here. I know you can do better. This thing you did caused harm. What are you going to do about it? Here's how I can support you. Totally different conversation. Whee! How do we get in touch for your workshop series? Oh, well, you can message me at natty.rittenhouse@gmail.com, or well, Beryl Ann and Mercedes are connected to me, so you can also reach out to them. You can check out Rittenhouse. Our website is Rittenhouse. Our name is Rittenhouse A New Vision, so it's rittenhouseanv.com. I designed it myself, so I'd love your feedback. And actually, there's some great resources. There's a resource page, one specifically for community, and another for folks who are incarcerated or have been incarcerated. Not that they're not mutually exclusive groups, but there are different resources, but definitely check them out because most of them are free. Yay. Hi, Sha.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm just on my porch during this workshop trying to keep everyone's talking private, but I just want to say the website is amazing. And I thank you for coming again to share this workshop. It's extremely helpful right now. And yes, I would very much like additional training with you because you're speaking my language. Thank you.
Yes, sweet. It's good to see you. Yeah. Awesome. That's great feedback. And I would love to work with y'all. So I'll keep you posted. I will be running some TJ 101 workshops like this in the next few weeks, and also just waiting till there's critical mass to do an intensive 4 weeks. So if you get in touch, that helps build that critical mass. But I am aiming to do something in May. That's like a deep dive. I see Ivy asked, I'm curious to hear what Nadia is seeing in terms of how often TJ is playing out in communities. Is it becoming more common? More no? Great question. Yes, it is actually. I think, so 2 things I would say. I feel like in the last few years, people are hearing about it in radical communities and are like, okay, we're going to try this out. But I would also say that people kind of like dip their toe in and they're like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. I didn't know I was signing up for this. Oh, this is hard. Oh, it's messy. You know, right? I'm comedic, but yeah, and that's fair. It's real because those are muscles or those are skills to develop. That's capacity to develop. I'd say many folks are very uncomfortable with conflict and holding space for hard conversations. And you know, there's no amount of trigger warnings that will prevent people from experiencing vicarious trauma when you're holding space for someone who's been traumatized. That's very real. But also more people are, I think, absolutely in response to this last year, the heightened awareness about violence against Black people and racialized people, heightened awareness of police brutality and violence and how that has caused the deaths of many, many people, including folks who struggle with mental illness. I'm thinking about Regis Korchinski-Paquette, who's my neighbor. And folks, you know, kind of like getting involved in that protest, chanting, let's defund the police, and then realizing like, okay, what's our alternative? Is there an alternative? What are we gonna do? I'm chanting, let's keep each other safe, but what does that mean? And so then people are going down that wormhole of inquiry. And so I am getting more and more messages from folks who are like, what is this? Tell me more. How do I learn? And I imagine Beryl Ann and Mercedes, you're witnessing that also in terms of Parkdale Mutual Aid and the different organizing spaces that folks are like, okay, I'm ready. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Let's go. Let's do this. It's actually so exciting.
Right. So right. So true, Nadia. And so is Lee and Ivy, Nadia. We have a few of them here. If not over half of them. I'm just joking. Yeah. So they're listening to you.
That's great.
That's why probably Ivy asked. We wanted the idea of.
Sweet. Yeah. So like, I just want to say actually like this whole training series to me and all the organizing that Parkdale Women's Leadership Group has been doing, whether you call it transformative justice or not, it is part of that movement, which is like empowering people to care for each other, to take care of each other, keep each other safe, to address those systemic issues together, to not rely on the state or build capacity to not have to rely on the state. Because anyone who works in social services knows the funding is limited and it changes every 4 years.
And I was just thinking too, when I think of PP, when they reach out to having the Women Leadership Series and where we created the Parkdale Women Leadership Group, that's what derived from that leadership series. And then even Mutual Aid Parkdale, when PP reach out to residents in our community to start a mutual aid network. I mean, you know, I can't tell you how in depth many residents are for, you know, for that initial initiative. And to this day, you know, some of the, you know, we're still standing, Lee, Ivy, we're still going, you know, Nadia, it's amazing, Mercedes. Yeah. And so I'm just saying, you know, we're truly grateful for, you know, and I think that, you know, we decide to, you know, that's part of the transformation. So we see the transformation. So we see how we're here for each other. We helping each other. We helping residents in our community. So I'm saying it starts with us as individual, and then we're spreading across, you know, in our community and the people that we interact with.
Yes. I got to share a few reflections just based on what you shared. So like, just today, someone reached out who lives in Parkdale, who's experiencing transphobia with a neighbor. And they're in a co-op, and the co-op's response was call the police. And they're like, my neighbor is a marginalized person. That's not what I want to do. I need some help. And they reached out asking if I was aware of anyone in Parkdale that could help. And I was like, well, actually, I mean, there's a lot of cool organizing. So like, let's talk, let's figure it out. And I mentioned Parkdale Women's Leadership Group and Parkdale People's Economy and Parkdale Mutual Aid, because those are tangible things. And then I think it's so important, even if you're not sure what you're doing, to create spaces and keep holding spaces, because as you do that, when people need it, they know they can go to you. And by that, I mean, like, even if you say, okay, we meet once a month and this is a practice space. We read things, we talk about it, we Skillshare, and we just keep doing that. We let people know we're doing this thing. We're not professionals, we're just learning. And as people need it, they will reach out to you. And then you have been practicing a little bit. So you can, you know, step in. It's a beautiful thing. You're doing it. I note Saroja has a hand up and there's some questions in the chat. So I don't know which to choose. Go for it, Saroja.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing and super informative. And I feel like I can apply it in my personal life and also in my work. And I guess I have two questions, but you don't have to answer them both. One of them is about, it's more of a personal question. It's a challenge that I'm dealing with. I'm just trying to, I'm trying to figure out, for me, like in theory, the principles of transformative justice are really exciting. And I feel like I can use them in my everyday work with people. But when it comes to family, it's really difficult to think through how I would apply this, especially in a situation where a family member is experiencing pretty intense mental health challenges and not necessarily not necessarily treating them. So I'm just wondering, in a situation where you're also in a municipality where maybe there isn't like where there isn't an alternative to police, and maybe where a situation happens where you need support right away, but you don't know how to deal with it. Do you have any suggestions on what you can do in that situation?
It's a really good question. It hits a personal chord for sure. It strikes a personal chord. Okay, the first thing I would say is, I just give examples. That's all I can do for my own personal experience or what I've witnessed or heard from others. But I can say, so my family is on a farm in the middle of nowhere in southwestern Ontario, and there are very few resources, and there's a lot of poverty. We're working class people, and there are a host of different things that have shown up in our family over time, and we have a proclivity towards not talking. But we did start about 15 years ago holding family talking circles. So we just applied the technology of circle keeping to easy conversations or nice conversations, like once a year, let's have a talking circle and we'll talk about our hopes. And each of us will get an opportunity to share, like, what are your hopes for the next year? What are some supports that we could offer? And it's just a way to like make sure everybody spoke, because some folks in my family are more inclined to speak. Others, they would never talk about anything personal, and others, they'll never speak. So it's an opportunity for us to hear each other and be intentional. And then when things, I'll just say, shit hit the fan, we had that practice. So we could tap it in. We could say, let's have a talking circle and just try it out. And it just made the like strategizing easier. So that's one thing I would say. But of course, it is tricky to get people to just sit together and talk. I know that. I acknowledge that. And then, yeah, resources for mental illness outside of Toronto. I wish I had an answer for you outside of like organizing. And it actually really pains me because it's a real issue in the rurals and in smaller communities, that there are so few resources and people struggle through their lives because they can't pay to go to that beautiful rehab center for $20,000 where they can get great food and therapy and yoga, all great healing modalities. So I feel like I almost want to say, like, email me and let's strategize in a deeper way, depending on where your family is. Because there are also amazing people in every place doing organizing. And sometimes they're looking for other allies to work with. That's what I want to say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll ask my other question later once everyone else is gone.
Okay. I'll go over to the chat here. Let's see. Lee. Hey, Lee. I've been in touch with a neighbor that I was helping bring material things when she revealed the violence that had happened to her recently. She did have a neighbor interfere so her kids didn't see, but now she told me she is moving out of Toronto. How can I help her stay safe in her community? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And thanks for being an ally to your neighbor. I think the things I would say are to sit with that person and create a sort of a safety map of sorts to in this case, actually, just to show like, there are people who love you in this community. There are resources to help keep you safe in this community. We need you in this community, and I'm writing it down. I'm mapping it. I'm drawing the lines between these people and you so that you see that, you know, we need you here, that we value you here, and these are some things that we can do. And ask her if she'd be open to a safe, like a care group or whatever language, you know, she would relate to, but like a crew of folks that she trusts who could meet with her, and even see if she'd be open to trying it once and see where that goes. Those are some things that I would say. Just so that because that may be coming from a place like she just doesn't believe that she could have safety here. And that perhaps that if people know about this violence, that they will reject her or they won't believe her. So yeah, those are some things that you could try. And,
okay.
And you can
Thanks,
totally
Maddie.
message me if you want to talk more about it too.
Thank you so much. Don't know if you can hear me, but okay, awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was thinking from your talk that was definitely what I would do. Next step would be just like offer her some kind of care circle. We have our group on Fridays. She could join that. Or like maybe to find an Indigenous circle in her new community because she's Indigenous. So yeah, I'll send out all those ideas. I'm not sure if she has moved yet or not. So I'll get in touch. Thanks.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, with that information alone, I'm like, oh, ideas are bubbling. Yeah, so please do get in touch.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sweet. 7:52. How are we doing for time?
Nadi, can I share something?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, you know, like one of the things I feel like we have missing in communities, like a space where, you know, like maybe some type of resource where people could maybe, you know, like when I think of mutual aid network map, if something happened to one of the residents and maybe not, you know, sometimes it's personal and sometimes it isn't, sometimes a landlord issue, like, you know, they share it and then, you know, we offer that emotional support or maybe privately message offering support. But, you know, like we don't have any type of resource, we, you know, where we could, you know, if somebody's in a crisis, you know what I mean, other than the police. And, you know, so I'm just saying, you know, I think if we could, you know, create something like that in communities, you know, alternatives, then we don't, you know, because it bring me back to when I thinking, what did our ancestors did before they created the police force? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure they look at ways to resolve issues around this stuff. They talk about it and do things, the things they do. So I'm just saying, you know, how could we work as residents in our community to help and support each other where we don't need to rely on the police?
So like some immediate thoughts. Thank you so much for that. That's like, yes, applause hands. I think about, so that the practice space that I described, like I would call a TJ practice space, can also be a place to strategize. So if people know that's a place where they can bring a conflict and that there will be other people there that are kind of like an informal council of people who can help them strategize, come up with resources, that is hugely, hugely helpful. I am a part of 2 different TJ practice spaces, actually 3. And like I'll bring the same conflict to all 3 because I'll get so many different perspectives, and where similar perspectives show up, I'm like, okay, that's emergent, that there's a lot of energy there. And then it's a form of accountability also, because I'm letting people know this is something that's happening in our community. What can we do together? It's diversifying the resources that we might be able to leverage. So that's one thing I would say. Another thing that, like, I don't know, I hope that the mental health crisis line that gets created is good. But that is one resource that I hope gets developed, that at least we can call and it doesn't involve the police. I recognize that there are lots of challenges and limitations to that structure that's being created, but that does feel like, I mean, it is an immediate, absolute response to this last year and the violence of police. So let's hope that that continues to be a useful resource. If folks don't know about it, it's called the Reach Out Network. And they are working on creating, and I think they're trying to push policy through the city or to get funding to have it sustained as like a 211 number that you can call 24/7 for mental health crises in particular. And they would send social workers rather than police and people that are not armed. with de-escalation skills. It's not up and active yet, but Reach Out Network is. You can Google them, and for they're I would say in constant invitation of input from community about what would be most useful, what our community needs. That's one piece. I would really like to create a TJ fund, like a pot of money that people can tap for any TJ process, which could look like therapy, could look like, resourcing people to participate in circles, a host of different things. I'll keep you posted. I'm trying to fundraise for it, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, I want to say, like, I can't iterate enough how important it is to hold space and to let people know we're holding this space for this work, and just tap in when you can, and we will be here. That's my quick answer. Ooh, we're approaching the end.
We're getting close. I know there was, I'm not sure if we did, Saroja, if you feel like you did want to throw in your last question, and then our last updates are pretty quick. So go for it if you have one last question.
Oh, okay, I'll be really quick. Thank you. I just had a question about working in community with multiple stakeholders and people coming from all walks of life. And I was just curious about, some communities do work in partnership with police, or they have police at different neighborhood tables and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering how to start a conversation about transformative justice in spaces where it's a new concept or where police are involved.
Great question. Yep. I mean, if you would ask me this question 2 years ago, I would say, oh, it's going to be hard, but important, critical. And it's rooted in abolition and looking at the data about the violence that police perpetuate on our communities, and especially poor and racialized communities. But then I would say, like, suddenly we're in a moment where people are paying attention in a different way to police violence. And so even if they want to say, oh, but we've had, good relationships, they also can't deny what they're seeing around them, which isn't new. It's just being shared more. It's being documented and shared more. Of course, we all know this. So that all that to say, the social conditions are a little bit better today to have that conversation. And I do think it's a part of a larger conversation about safety. If you're organizing with folks, framing it around safety, and then requesting the ability to critique, to highlight what hasn't been working, bringing data that's specific to your community about how police interact with your community. I think all of those things can be strategies, depending on the community and how much they've relied on the police, or believed that the police protected them, or have been convinced that that's the only strategy. It may be a long game, but like so critical. And I think if you can see other entry points, like if people are really invested in the safety of their children, okay, so then let's look at the data about police at schools. Let's look at the data of the school to prison pipeline. Let's just talk about the real stuff, and then build from there. I'm like at heart an abolitionist, so I feel like let's just keep talking about the violence of prisons and everything that leads people to the violence of prisons. But it's a long game. Basically, I want to like celebrate your care and commitment to having those conversations, and also acknowledge that it will be hard. But anyone and everyone who feels like I have enough relationships that I could start to invite those conversations. Yes, do it. Yes. And there's, again, like today, there's so much data on the internet about the actual impacts of police violence on our communities that like we didn't have actually 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we can leverage that stuff, because people can't deny that data, or they can, but we can be angry at them for doing that. That's a really great question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great, really helpful.
Should I share my last slide?
Share your last slide for sure. Yeah. And maybe as you're pulling it up, we can use this as an opportunity to quickly start wrapping things up, at least on our end. Yeah. Just Natty, thank you again for all of your incredible teachings and knowledge. Like, this is such a blessing. We've learned so much, and this has just been such a fantastic space. Thank you to everyone for also opening up, being vulnerable, being inquisitive, asking all your questions. These are so critical for us to continue to think about what this actually looks like in practice. And we're all learning, we're all fumbling together. And so this is just the start of that journey. I do want to remind folks that there is one last workshop in this series. We're nearing the end. This one's on community healing. And I'm not sure, Berlin, if you want to say just a couple words about it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I encourage you to come out to the last workshop, which is on community healing. It's going to be on March 29th from 6 to 8 p.m. And it's going to be in collaboration with the Parkdale Women Leadership Group, Mutually Parkdale, and Khalil Dorival. So we're going to look at what we could do as a community, you know, just in case a traumatic incident happened in our community. What are some of the ways we could heal as a community? So I'm looking forward to it, and so should you. Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you so much. And fun fact, Khalil is Berlin's son, so we're especially lucky.
Amazing. It's genetic. Sweet. I just end with this beautiful image. We keep each other safe. These resources, I trust that Mercedes and the Parkdale Women's Leadership Group will share these out. And if you are interested in more, just holler at me. The invitation is sincere, and it was such an honor to work with y'all this evening. Cheating Rich.
Thanks so much, Nettie. If folks want to unmute themselves, say goodnight, thank yous. We appreciate you all coming out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
so much, Natty.
Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
gratitude, Natty.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Miigwech, good night.
Guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good to see you.